Thank you both so much. That's why we love editing. Hello, my name is Lindsay, and I'm the host for today's Black Mental Health interview or Black Mental Health Matters interview. Today's topic is media portrayal of Black men and its impact on mental health. And I'm honored to have two amazing Black men here with me today to discuss this very important topic, Dr. Cloud and Pastor Graham. Thank you both so much for joining me on this topic. So, first, can you each introduce yourself and tell the viewers about your experience and why this topic is so important to you?
I'll let Pastor Graham go first.
Okay.
All right. Well, I always say that my experience on this topic begins with the rich history of my family, being on my dad's side of the family, one of the only Black families to maintain 99 acres of land in southern Georgia. And so I grew up in a family that often rehearsed our history and our legacy, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful when it comes to the experience of Black people in this country. And we've always had meaningful discussions on how Black men are betrayed. And so that has navigated my life as a professor, my life as an activist, my life as an author, a poet, and even ministry. And so this topic means so much to me, and I believe that it's very on time to have this conversation right now. And so I'm excited about us talking about what we're seeing and what we may need to do and how it's impacting our health. Being that mental health is now at the forefront in ways that it wasn't, we're now in a prime time for transformation.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So I'm Dr. Cloud. Um, Mental health for Black men is one of those topics that I love to talk about. When I did my doctorate degree, my research was on mental health in African American men and how do we kind of address stigmatization and stereotypes in mental health for Black men and how do we get them involved. And so I'm kind of glad I kind of had the same sentiments as Pastor G. That these are important conversations because we are seeing mental health become to the forefront now of society. And so, this conversation is very prevalent as well because we get to see exactly how the media portrays us as Black men, and we to kind of take the narrative back and show them that that narrative is not what people think it is.
Right. Okay. Thank you both so much. So this first question is for the both of you. Do you feel that the portrayal of Black men in the media at this point is overwhelmingly positive or negative, or is it a combination of both?
I'll yield to Dr. Cloud.
So I'm going to say that right now at the media currently that is starting to become positive. And the reason why is that we're starting to see shows really take a stance on mental health and providing that space for mental health. And then we're starting to see Black men talk about their mental health now like on TV.
Right.
And I can give two prime examples that I've seen in the last couple of years. So in my doctoral research, one of the clips that I used came from the show Blackish. And so in that scene, we seen Dre and his son and Pop talk about pretty much what does society want Black men to look like. And I'm in the son saying that, well, what if I want to cry? What if I'm sad some days? What if I'm depressed? And Dre said that as men, society doesn't allow us to have those type of emotions. And his son said, well, why can't I? And so it opened that conversation on between the father and the son. It was 3 generational. I think I liked it because we got to see granddad, dad, and the son talk about how over society that mental health has started to change and how Black men can start talking about their emotions. And another thing recently that I've seen in the media, and I think it's starting to show a positive light, is Love is Blind. Never seen the show a day in my life. But one clip I did see has to do with, I think his name is Clay. And Clay told the young lady that he couldn't be with her because of trauma from watching his own father and how his father treated his mother, how his father cheated on his mother. And then you got to kind of see a conversation between his parents, having that conversation as well, that his father did damage him, but that he understood and that he was doing the work to work on not only his mental health, but to make sure that he would be a good husband for that young lady, AJ. And he knew he wasn't at that yet, so he didn't want to hurt her because his mental health wasn't there yet. And those are, I think, two good examples that we're starting to see now that we're starting to advocate and show that Black men are kind of taking a positive a positive light to their mental health, and they're starting to take more control of it.
Thank you. No, shout out to Blackish. That was a great show. I think they definitely portrayed Black men in a lot of different lights, and they were all like some negative, a lot positive. But since it was like a comedy, I'm glad that they were able to keep the message and make us still look good. You know what I mean?
And that message was strong. I love that message.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, Pastor Graham.
So first of all, I do agree with what Dr. Cloud was saying about Blackish, especially. But to my understanding, Blackish doesn't come on anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Wow.
Okay. So if I had to go from my limited observation of what's on right now, in a lot of ways, I feel like the Black man is disappearing from portrayal.
Okay.
Like you have Shamar that does SWAT, right? That is an example of a Black man who's leading, has a Black woman that he loves in his life. But outside of him, in a lot of shows, we don't see Black fathers. What I like about that show though is you see him have a relationship with his dad, and it's sometimes complicated. And so they have real life discussions. But that show to me doesn't get all the notoriety that it should, because in a lot of shows that are out there, even in relationships, we'll see a lot of woman and woman relationships, but not a lot of Black man and woman relationships, or Black men, period. Even one of my favorite shows, FBI, the one Black man that was working got killed a couple of weeks ago. So, like, I don't see the Black man. It's more so not negative as much as it looks like making him invisible again.
Okay.
From my perspective.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. That's definitely something I didn't think about. I kind of watch everything, and maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's the privilege of being a woman, like, because everything comes with its privilege. So maybe it's something I don't look at, where's the Black man with the Black man, but I do see a lot of Black women. So thank you for that perspective for the people who aren't seeing it the way that, you did, or that you do. Okay, I guess my next question would be, I'll start with you, Pastor Graham. From the images that you have seen, what are some of the stereotypes or the most common stereotypes that you see for Black men?
It portrayed in the media today.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this: reality television is a big thing, and reality television is built on negativity.
Yes.
And in those spaces, I think that they demonstrate sometimes a hypersexual vibe. Like there's this bravado, hypersexual image. It's like the buck type image that they try to portray. And what's amazing to me is how even in our own medias, we have glorified that idea till we portray ourselves as such and think that it's actually demonstrations of strength. And so in those ways, I don't like it. Now, I will say, I can't think of the actor's name, but he has a show called Irrational. And what I do like about that show is he's a psychologist, and he talks about the way people think. And he's extremely brilliant and clever. And I love that representation of him. So that will be a great example of that I do see today. But it combats that buck hypersexual vibe that we see a lot of times in reality television shows. Because again, regular shows I don't see as much.
Okay.
So
they kind of highlight that toxic masculinity. Am I correct in saying
that?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And Dr. Cloud.
So I kind of gotta go with Pastor G again on this one, because out of the shows that I've seen and I watch, reality TV is something that I rarely watch because I find it kind of be toxic and negative. Even from the shows that have had a chance to view with Black men, I don't really get to see a lot of Black in some of the shows that I watch. And when I do, it may be a few shows where, like, for instance, Tyler Perry's House of Pain, right? So you still see that CJ, Uncle Curtis, they're still, the black fathers in the household trying to do right by their families. So, and then, I look at other shows on TV, and you don't see that too often. And so it's rare for me to find a TV show where the black man is being portrayed as the head of the household still.
Okay.
And it's rare for me to find find a TV show where the black man is not being viewed as some type of negative connotation, or a societal norm or what a would be. And so when I find those type of shows, they're far and few in between. And that's kind of why I don't get to watch TV a lot, because you watch these shows and you're kind of like, okay, but you don't really see a lot of strong black male leads, or they still go with the whole dad is absent, dad's not here. And I kind of have to look back at shows that I'm very young, but I look back, I watch a lot of shows that growing up, my grandmother, where like, Good Times is one of my favorite old time shows, because you get to see James Evan in the household, right?
Okay.
And you get to see that stern black father. And then you get to see the Cosby Show. You see, Dr. Hustle in the household. You get to see a different world. You get to see Dwayne and how he navigates his marriage with Whitley. You get to see so like in the house with LL Cool J, you get to see how he's trying to navigate that. So it's those type of shows that we don't really have in today's society.
Yeah.
And so we don't really get to see what it looks like now to have a male figure in the household, or what society ideal of a positive black male in the household, or on TV. Because like he said, you got SWAT, FBI. Yeah, we get to see them in those big masculine roles, but we don't get to see black men in the media portrayed as what does it look like if dad is the one at home taking care of the kids, right? We don't get to see that. You get to see the duality that a father can be more than just the one who brings home the bacon, but he can also be a nurturer and a caregiver. We don't get to see that a lot, and I think a lot of media chooses not to portray that, because they want to stay with the connotation that black men are just supposed to be hyper masculine. They're just supposed to be, that I call it that ghost figure. Like they just in the area. Like either they outside the home because they're always working, or dad is just disciplinary. Like he's just there to do discipline, nothing else. And I look at if you look at Everybody Hate Chris, like how Julius was in the household, he was working, and Rochelle would take care of the kids, but Julian would get involved as well, because they had that co-parenting understanding. So I think now media, we still haven't gotten there. I think we're trying to get there, but I don't think we have, because even in the recent Color Purple, even though it's based off the book adaptation from way back in like 1980s, you know, you still get to see that we're still following some of the same stereotypes and tropes that were put into place long before.
Right. As I was listening to you, I found it very interesting. The shows that you mentioned were sitcoms. And I just find it interesting. And I'm like, well, maybe just throwing it out there, maybe it's because like sitcoms aren't, or at least I don't see many anymore. Blackish was one of the last ones. They have sitcoms anymore. So I'm curious as to if that plays a role. And of course those weren't the only shows at the time, but a lot of the things that was reality television was not a thing when Family Matters and Bill and the Cosby Show were on. And to Pastor Graham's point, now we have all of these reality shows. So maybe people just aren't interested in the sitcoms, and sitcoms are where we were actually able to show the family's life, not just a movie, or not just a portion of the drama that's going on. It was multiple episodes a season, and it went on for 5-6 years, So that was just a thought. But also you made me think about a question while you were speaking. You said sometime, or in a lot of the times in these shows or in the media portrayal of Black men, they're kind of like the ghosts. They're around, but they're not there. They're working. They may be in prison. They may be, not that you said that part, but now I'm just adding to it. Or, they may have died or something like that. I am wondering if that unfortunately is a lot of our realities. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be highlighted. So I'm not saying, well, we have to show these things, but one could say that everyone's story deserves to be told. So do you think it's a matter of just telling it too much, like we're beating a dead horse, or is this valid? Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying, and I'm not. What I will say, and I'm gonna say this the best way I know how.
Okay.
I think because media has found their niche, right? And and I think what that means is that why beat a dead horse when we already got something that's proven to work? Why do I need to add the black man to media when I can just follow the same stereotype that the African American community itself has already put on black men? The single black mother raising the kids by herself, the deadbeat daddy, the child support, daddy in jail, daddy dead, or daddy always at work. So there's really no male involvement. They need a father in the household. And so you like we talked about earlier, then you have some of those sitcoms that say we're trying to beat that negative stereotype. But if we go all the way back, if you look at like Good Times, the actor who plays James Evans left because they wanted to make it into the typical Negro troupe, right? And having JJ focus on JJ and his foolery versus a good family-centered sitcom, which it was. It may have had JJ and his shenanigans sometimes, but it always had that type of family message with the black men around the household as well, because James was a stern father. And then when we come forward now into current time, into this era of media, we're seeing more reality TV. And so the media has not found a way to kind of get back into that niche, because they like, well, we don't need black men to make a fool of themselves because we have reality TV. They fighting on TV, they cussing on TV, they doing everything that people already said that they're doing. So we don't need to do anything else to paint them in a negative light, because we gave them this platform and we're letting them act like the clowns that society already thinks that they are. So why do we need to change that image? And then you got certain shows that are trying to change the narrative, but those shows a lot of black people are not watching, because black people love to watch nonsense TV, or they love to watch reality TV, and they'd rather see that versus watching something a little bit more family centered. And I think a recent show that I like, for instance, The Upshaws. I love The Upshaws on Netflix. But the thing is, you see that I don't know why that man name slipped my head that fast. The one who plays, yes, thank you, who plays Benny Upshaw, right? You see that he's bad. He's not a terrible father. He tries to do everything for his kids and for his wife, and he admits his mistakes and his the best that he can. And I think I like The Upshaws because it's one of those sitcoms, again, another sitcom, right? But we see a black father trying, and we see that they're trying to change the narrative around black fatherhood, because that show deals with current times. A black father dealing with his son, dealing with his firstborn son being gay, dealing with a child that he had during a break, so he has Irish twins, but two of his kids were born around the same time, two different women. How do you navigate that co-parenting all together? And he's trying to run a business, make sure that his wife, who is going through depression as well, and he has to take the lead now. So he's going from being the breadwinner to also being the one to take care of the kids in the household and make sure that everybody is surviving. At least making sure that they will live long enough to survive.
Right.
And so we started to see this shift. But a lot of people don't like to watch these type of shows because it's not the negative connotations that they're used to seeing anyways. So we don't really have much discussion about them, but those shows try and push to make sure that we're having those conversations.
Okay, thank you. And Pastor Graham.
I wanted to bring up the BMF and Power and string of shows. So one of his shows was about the black man that I think was locked up unjustly.
Oh, that was, I think it was called Life. That was a 50 Cent show, but it wasn't a part of Stars. I think it was ABC. But
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So that show, I like that. I like that idea. You know what I mean? Showing. I believe it was a black lawyer as well, I think. And so, and it showed even a black man who'd been criminalized, but it tore down the perception of, just because a person got a record, just because somebody's been arrested doesn't make them a non-brilliant individual. Right. So I did like that. And of course, BMF, you're dealing with, first of all, it's based on a true story, right? Okay. And you're dealing with black people in crime. That one's a little different because it is based upon something that truly took place.
Mhm.
But I do see 50 Cent in some ways trying to bring a balance of it. You know what I mean? Like even in Power, I mean you're gonna have your intimate scenes and stuff, but he doesn't do the tomfoolery, I would say.
Mhm.
Like, I will say that he, even in the midst of criminal stuff, he's still presenting presentable black men.
Yes.
You know what I
Ghost
mean?
was very presentable.
Yeah, so we can get into the weeds of it, but you understand what I'm saying. So that I'd be amiss not to mention him being a black man who's actively really turning on representation of black people in the media now. And so I just want to make sure to make a nod to the efforts that he has done.
Thank you for that. I completely. We were talking about sitcoms, so we forgot about that whole other sector. And he has a long list of shows at this point.
Mhm.
Right.
So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay, so now I want to turn it to both of you in a different way. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Cloud. So the portrayal of Black men, how in media, how has that affected your self-esteem throughout the years and the way you feel that you present in this world?
So I want to say that the portrayal in the media of black men, I'm not going to say that it's really affected me, and the reason why I can say that now is because I was raised in a very, I want to say, Southern household, and so I was raised with my grandmother, my mother, and stuff like that. So I come from a very strong family, of black women, a strong lineage that I'm very happy to come from, and so in the media. I don't really see myself a lot. My dad was in and out, but my dad was always around in some sense. So I always had a relationship with him. So I never really it never really affected me. But I think the only thing that really affected me outside of TV shows is the killing of unarmed black men. Now I think that really did affect me a lot because it made me think that when I get stopped by the police, when I get stopped, and I worked in law enforcement before, I was always scared, and I never understood where that fear came from, and then I realized that the unarmed killing of so many black men, not just with Trayvon Martin, but we also looking at like Fruitvale Station is one movie I cannot watch again because it's like the one movie I watched it one time and I never watched it again because it was so traumatic to me. And it's those type of things that at any point that it has made me fear of local law enforcement is really what really affected me only. But outside of that, nothing else has really affected me in the media outside of that because every day I wake up knowing that I have a life to live. But anytime I'm stopped by the police, it's like my life can stop right here and now, just for the simplest thing. And I always have this locked up fear. When I got pulled over, I want to say like a year or two ago, I had called my best friend on FaceTime. I said, "You're not hanging up this phone until I can pull off," because it was my biggest fear. And even one of my close friends, when he got pulled over, he called me and he was like, "I'm getting pulled over. I'm afraid, so I'm just gonna keep you on the phone." And I think that has really caused a lot of fear or internal fear in black men when we get pulled over by the police. There was already a mistrust of police, but as we see it more on TV, right? And we're seeing more unarmed killing of black men by the police, by those who are meant to serve and protect. We start to have that counter transference going on, that kind of that fear of that could be us at any time. And so I think that's really kind of how it affected me. And so we try to break the stigma. And I've worked in local law enforcement before. I used to work at a juvenile correction facility. A lot of young African American guys and a lot of black sheriffs and correctional officers, and we would have these open conversations about what does it feel like when you're stopped by the police, or what does it feel like to be a black man in society, and then how does that deviate from what we see on TV or what do we see in the media portrayal of us. And one of my juveniles, I remember he said, all they see me is as a thug. That's it. He said when I got arrested, they said you're nothing but a thug and you deserve to be put under the jail.
Wow.
And me and him sit there and talk, and he cried. And these are 14 to 17-year olds, and he sit there and cried because he said he never felt dehumanized like that before. So all I have to say is that that's the only thing I think that has really kind of affected me, and I've been working to kind of destigmatize that stigma or that fear over time, by having these conversations, by including law enforcement in a lot of my discussions when I'm out in the community, or just having these sit down conversations with those who have been affected by it as well, to make sure that, what we see on the media may not always transfer over into real life, but making sure that we do have those open conversations.
Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Pastor Graham.
So I'm dating myself telling this, but there was an old show called Spencer for Hire
Okay.
many years ago, and there was a black actor, Avery Brooks. He played a man whose name was Hawk on the show. And Avery Brooks, y'all may know him. He was the only black male leader of a Star Trek show. He was bald headed, and I forget the name of his show, but he was the leader on that particular Star Trek show. But anyway, on this show, in his contract, he wrote that he would never get beat up by the cops, that the main character who plays Spencer was a white cop, because he's not a cop, he was a vigilante, but he would never get beat up and he would never lose a fight on set, even to the star. That was written in his contract. And he was conscious. I would dare to say he's the most conscious representation of a black man in the history of television. And so, because he had a black mentor who was very Afrocentric that he would talk to, they would African drum music. Like when they were talking, you could tell it was a shift in the music and the atmosphere. They would use African proverbs. They talked about helping the community. And he often kept the white cop in check in terms of what was going on with the community. And so he would talk about, they would quote Malcolm X all the time and stuff like that.
Can you
So,
repeat the name of that show? Because I'm going to need to watch it now.
yeah, the show was called Spencer for Hire, and
Okay.
then they gave him a spin-off show called A Man Called Hawk
Okay. Thank you.
that focused on him. And it lasted maybe one season, and they
Okay.
got rid of it. But I'm telling you, so I say that to say that was on at the time where consciousness was becoming a thing in this country and for me. And at that time, I was debating with school teachers and stuff like that. And I spent a lot of time with a lot of prominent black conscious speakers at that time. And so it made me vigilant about bringing to life the black man who speaks intelligent, who's not afraid, who's just as thoroughbred as a so-called street guy,
Yeah.
but intelligent as a professor, like that balance. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
And so when I look at media today, what affects me the most is, like I was saying earlier, the lack of a certain black male representation. Irrational's about the best, but because he's brilliant and tough. I mean, he's brilliant. He's not necessarily the toughest, but he's brilliant. And so that is what I will say. What affects me is that we need to see shows. Like I love Most Def's movie that talked about the black gentleman who was the doctor, who was
It wasn't Gifted Hands.
yes,
Okay.
yes. We need things like that. We need shows that come on weekly like that. I do know that Ryan Coogler, who directed Black Panther, and Michael B. Jordan are working on the very first Mansa Musa movie. Mansa Musa was an African king during the Mali Empire who was so rich that when he traveled the world dropping off gold, he shifted the economy of the world. And so they're doing a movie about him. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Anything Ryan does is amazing. So bringing Ryan up, actually, just to pivot. So obviously, you guys were around in 2018 to see the mass hysteria that was created by Black Panther. So obviously, we were, or specifically Black men, were highlighted in a beautiful way in that movie. And it was at the time, I'm not sure if another movie beat it by now, but at the time, it was like one of the biggest Marvel movies of all time. My question to you is, obviously it was positive, but do you think that, I mean, it was make believe ultimately, so how do you think movies like that help or not help, because like I said, we were any positive image is great, but they were also superheroes in a country in Africa that doesn't even really exist. Not even really. It literally does not exist. So what's your perspective on that? Oh, sorry, I'll start with you, Dr. Cloud.
No, you're fine. I was thinking.
Okay.
So, Black Panther. Let me tell you, I love Black Panther. I was in grad school at Howard when it came out, and so we went and seen it, and it was so good to see a movie for about us. I ain't gonna say it's for us, but I'm gonna say it's about us,
Right,
right?
right.
And it was so good. And then to see Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, who was a Howard alum, in that film as well, portraying a king of Wakanda, maybe fictional, fictional continent, sorry, country,
Yeah,
but I was getting there eventually.
yeah.
Maybe a fictional country, but just to see how we took so much pride in this movie and the media portrayal of it, to me it was phenomenal. But you are right, it's fiction, right? I think but even though it's fiction, it had a major point about Black Panther. I think was not only about keeping family at the center of everything that you do, because as you notice in the movie, Queen Ramonda, Shuri, Lupita, they were all a part of his village, and he always had somebody there around him to support him and push him as a Black man, but also as the king of Wakanda. But even with him fighting Michael B. Jordan, you realize that these two Black men had the same goal,
Yep.
but. And I always tell people I'm gonna die on this hill. I agree with Killmonger. I don't care. I would die on that hill because him and T'Challa both had the same goal. They just had different ways that they wanted to achieve that goal. And it's the same. I look at it like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Next.
Like same idea, same ideals,
Right.
different ways they want to execute it, right? Martin Luther King was more, we gonna march for your freedom. Malcolm was more like, we could just shoot this out and call it a day.
Right.
It's like two different ways, and
Mhm.
that's the same way that Black Panther gave me as well. But we also got to see a media portrayal, and I think this is the only negative part about that movie that I ever had to say. And if y'all haven't seen this by now, I don't care about the spoiler because this movie old. But I think the negative part was making T'Challa and Killmonger fight each other, and him killing him at the end of the movie. And to me, it played into the trope that we are all like not crab in the barrels, but Black men often would take that other Black men to get ahead.
Ah.
And I think that in this movie, we had the opportunity to play that differently, where Killmonger actually had to be the villain in this movie. Y'all could have just put a white man in that movie and we would have been okay, and we still would have loved it as the villain. But by putting him against another Black man who also was his family, it plays into that stereotype that sometimes you got to take down another Black man to get ahead, and I think I didn't like that part of it, because as Killmonger said, I'd rather die in the sea with my ancestors than be chained. And that right there kind of was like, I kind of agree with that, because why do I have to put down another fellow Black man to get ahead, or for us to work in solidarity with each other?
Thank you for that. And really quick, Pastor, before you start, that was a good point that you brought up about it showed that them fighting and killing at the end really wasn't, it didn't keep them in the best light. And I find it frustrating that because of our history and the way that the media has portrayed us as a community, and especially Black men, is that there's that nuance that exists. If these were white superheroes, it would have been like, yeah, he had to get rid of them and it was all good. But I never thought about that. And you're right. It just brings up another stereotype. It's like, we can't win. You can't even write a plot without there being something where it's like, well, that doesn't look great and this doesn't. But then at that point, it's just kind of like, then is it art? Then is it media? If we're just constantly trying, like, it's not a documentary,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not for teaching, it is for entertainment. So I just find that very interesting. It's kind of like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Graham, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, in full disclosure, I am a Marvel connoisseur.
Okay.
Let me set the table by saying that.
Okay. We're ready.
Also, let me say, I agree with Dr. Cloud with Killmonger, but Killmonger killed an ancestor, and so he's got to pay. If he hadn't killed the queen mother, we would be cool. But he killed the black mother.
Right.
He sealed his fate when he did that. But
Yes,
anyway,
no.
I digress. Um, so one, I was excited. I agree with Dr. Clay. I was excited about the portrayal. I was excited that it shined a light on the fact that Africa, the presentations that we're used to seeing of Africa are so erroneous. Because Africa has, what they portray is like as if all they did was show ghettos in America to everybody outside of America. So that whole marketing thing is a whole conversation in and of itself. But I was excited about the movie, and I think that what some people did was take the opportunity to see what were the real elements that they, and Ryan Coogler, I think, did the best he could to communicate to people that these are things based on real culture out here. And so folks went to search like never before. Folks went and bought African garb like never before. You know what I mean? And so that part I really enjoyed. And they begin a lot of people were awakened to an aspect of Africa that defied the stereotypes that have been put out there. But and so to the and also to the now what you were saying, and I do hear what you're saying about Killmonger. Me being a comic book reader, I do know that it was comic book accurate that Killmonger was the villain. But beyond the accuracy of the comic book, I understand the point that you're making in terms of because comic book movies, they always change from the comic book, and whenever they feel like it. And to seal it with the villain being white and a black person not being killed definitely would have been a much better choice for all the reasons that you laid out. And I would have liked that better. You know what I mean? You don't want something as profound as him saying that I'd rather die with my ancestors in the sea than on my knees to come from somebody completely villainous.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to connect the intelligence and the need for that statement to somebody that's that flawed from a contextual perspective. So I agree with you 100% with that, Dr. Cloud. But yeah, I think the movie opened up, and we need to still use it to open up more curiosity about real African history, which is why Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are doing what they're about to do.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I know that this is about Black men, but considering we're a community, Black women, we're always at the side of our Black men, mothers, sisters, wives. That being said, I'm curious as to how you feel about the fact that we are also affected by the images that we see of Black men. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Pastor. How do you feel? How do I word this? Do you feel like women are affected by? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I made it make sense. Do you feel that Black women are negatively or positively affected by the images that we see of Black men, Black boys, Black teenagers?
This is such a loaded. You need to know this is loaded. So I got a full clip for this right here. I'm gonna tell you that I remember speaking with some prominent Black leaders who were mentors of mine, who talked about the day coming, if we were not careful, of how we would sabotage ourselves through allowing the divide and conquer plan of the enemy to override our community to the point that we would now take on the roles of degrading ourselves and each other, with the white man not even being at the forefront of manipulation, that we would do it ourselves. So when you say that, I would say that it has affected Black women negatively. And I will say this, unless there's something I have not seen, I don't know of any race of people who degrade and disrespect their counterparts the way that we as Black people do. There is no music and no art form that degrades Black women the way that Black rappers, and I grew up hip hop,
Right.
the way that we talk disrespectfully about our women. And to that same point, there is no other nationality or ethnic group I know of that where the women of a gender talk so open and disregarding and disrespectful about their own men.
Mm.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
You can catch a Black woman talking about how foul a Black man is on all kind of networks and channels, and you can catch Black men in almost any given song talking about what they got this woman doing and they don't care this, that, and the third, and we are destroying one another. But to get to your point, that's what I see. And I see it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy because the more you keep promoting that and the image you put out there, we end up becoming what's being presented. And that right there is it's disheartening for me.
Just to throw, I know this, I'm interviewing you guys, but I just wanted to mention this. I have Black male friends. That being said, I see social media and I see the podcasts with men. I don't really pay attention to the music because I know that half of them are lying anyway, right? But the podcast, they're really having conversations with other men and saying, all the negative things that you're talking about. Black women are gold diggers, Black women, whatever, the list goes on. And it's crazy because I have representation of Black men, my family and friends. And for some reason, sometimes I have to catch myself and be like, you're watching this and there's an overwhelming amount of images of this, but you live it. And the men in your life are not like that. But it kind of makes me a little apprehensive sometimes because I'm just like, well, is that how they are out there, like outside of my circle? And it is a little bit nerve-wracking and scary because I'm, like the media it's like I said, and like we're all saying, the media can give you these images constantly. And it kind of makes you think that something is going on that from your experience that you haven't experienced. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Dr. Cloud, your perspective.
I would say what Pastor G has said is true, and I'm gonna see what I can add to it because he's really said a lot of my thoughts. So I'm just gonna try to add somewhere. I will say that Black women have always been, at the front of a Black man. I always say that Black women have never been behind Black men, and the reason I say that is pretty because I grew up with the thing that it takes a strong Black woman to lead, and it takes an even stronger Black man to let her lead. And I've always grew up with that notion, even as a child. And I think it's because of how I view my parents and how I view my grandparents as well. That my father, my grandfather, my great grandfather will always let the women lead, but it didn't make them less of a man. And so even in media today, or even in media back then, you didn't really see that. You see women has always been the submissive type, always be the subservient to their man. You'll see, and then especially in TV shows back then, and some TV shows, you always see women as being like the punching bag of those men. Like, and you starting to see that shift as well. I think one movie that shows like how it takes a toll on Black women is, have you ever seen Fences with Viola Davis and Denzel Washington? There's a monologue in there with Viola, and she says to Denzel Washington, I was standing with you the entire time, right? Because he's talking about how she watched him cheat, how she watched him be a bad father, but she stood by him each time, right? When he had a baby out of wedlock and the mom died and they took the baby in, she had raised the baby. She was standing right there every time, but he never thought about how it affected her. And I think we could use that same scene or that same analogy here on how we often look at Black women, and we don't understand that Black women have always stood by us through it all, through the good, the bad, the ugly. And we as Black men, I don't think we see how it affects them either. There used to be a campaign a long time ago, and I don't know if it's still around or I haven't seen it. And it used to be a bumper sticker. You'll see it, and it was a Black woman standing over a dead body, and I think it's like "Stop Killing My Son" or something like that. And so I haven't seen it in years, and I can say I haven't seen it in the last decade. So that should tell you something. In the early 2000s, I used to see it all the time, but these days I don't see it, and it shows that Black women saw exactly what was happening to Black men. They were trying to make a change, but it also was affecting them because they were the ones who were taking the emotional burnt of what was happening with Black men as well. And because I think we were leaning on women so much to not only because we see women as the nurturers and the caregivers, but we want understanding the emotional turmoil that the woman was taking in from us leaning on them so heavily.
Thank you, Pastor. So,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. I was going to say there's so many layers to this.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, there's a book called "They Stole It, But You Must Return It," and the book highlights the details of how chattel slavery was designed to tear apart the Black family, and it talked about the results that it would have. And so we know that masculinity, femininity, representations of men and women in relationships are not stagnant, and nor are they monolithic. There's various degrees of that. But I do believe that there are things that the media has intentionally promoted that prevents a level of unity that's necessary for the Black community to thrive. Like, for example, somebody once said that Black women are raised to be independent while other women are raised to be wives. And in that sentiment, sometimes there's this negative connotation on wife that's put. Sometimes in the effort for women not to be demoted, or in the effort for women not to be degraded, you end up giving this narrative of wife as though that's a bad thing. And so you end up throwing out femininity traits that are not about weakness. Because what ends up happening, feminine behavior now gets seen as weak, and only strength is masculine. Which means that now you have women who think acting masculine is what being strong is, and that all feminine traits are now weak. And so sometimes I see like the mixed match of this. We don't see at the end, if it comes down to Black men and women not respecting one another, we have to ask ourselves who is benefiting from these viewpoints. That's just something I wanted to share.
Thank you. To add to that, I guess to segue, I'm curious because there are reasons in history as to why the Black woman is so independent, right? Perfect example is that, from my understanding, there was a point in time where the government would not give aid, like such as food stamps, to Black households that had a Black man in it. So you had to be a single mother in order to get those benefits. So I think it was a point that you made previously, not, you didn't say the government, but the powers that be have made it this way. So that way we've kind of been, our community as a whole and our homes have been kind of shifted into this thing. And then they took our Black men and then they put them in prison for random things, or they killed them. And now we have to raise this family on our own as women. And then it's kind of like it's a snowball effect. It's a cycle. It's really bad. And then also Black women are one of the most educated groups right now. And that's not media portrayal, that's actual fact. So that being said, it's just very frustrating because you're right, there is a lack of femininity, but it's not something that we ask for. And there is a lack of masculinity on the male side, but it's nothing that they ask for. You know what I mean? And I guess the big question is, how do we fix it? I guess we've been trying to figure this out for decades now. And, I guess the whole point of this conversation is to figure out what we can do to do those things. But it was interesting that you brought that point up, because we weren't just born saying, okay, the woman is going to take care of everything and the man is going to be absent. There were the powers that be made it this way, and it's working out perfectly for them. And we're still trying to pick up the pieces. Sorry, that was just my tidbit. I do have a specific question for you, Pastor Graham.
Mm-hmm.
So you've worked with youth all the way from, I believe, kindergarten through college age?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The generations have changed a lot within the past few decades. So I'm curious, with your experience, have you seen anything as far as media portrayal is concerned? Have you seen it affect the youth that you have worked with throughout the years in a specific way?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have definitely seen the lack of positive Black representation become apparent amongst the limited perceptions of what strength is that I see amongst certain generations.
Mm-hmm.
There is this, see, we have more media than ever before due to the internet, but with more media, but less positive images is what we have going on.
Good point.
And so even though you can't control what people try to reach for and search for, but you can at least plant seeds to where their interest would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at a place now that a person could easily Google about African kings, what was Africa doing before slavery, Black inventors being responsible for 65% of the Industrial Revolution. But if you ain't got a consciousness to look for it, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see the overwhelming reality. And let me just say, to pivot, you know how you were saying about Black women being the most educated? I'm going to tell you what came to my mind when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
A book that people don't read enough of, and I call the book prophetic,
Mm-hmm.
and that is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson.
Mm.
Because he was very, and we're living it, to think that us getting degrees would make us better was flawed from the beginning. And that's what he talks about. We would become so educated that we are not community minded. And what do we have today? Everybody's trying to secure the bag. See, when family is the focus, who makes the most money isn't important.
Yeah.
But I want y'all to kind of imagine what I'm saying here. When we bought into this perception of people getting theirs, even going back to the men getting forced into jail, women raising children on their own. The whole idea of welfare system was a setup. Now, here's the thing. The welfare system wasn't presented just to Blacks, because there were others who rejected it because they saw it breaking up families. But they weren't living the Black reality. And so which made it harder for us to resist the systematic dynamic. You follow what I'm saying? And so, but what we did is it broke our families up, and it plants the seed that there can be family without one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so so when we start going in other directions, and so you talk about what is the solution? The solution has to be family first. But right now, we don't realize that we're dealing with people who have nationalism inbred in them. And this is what I mean. Our white counterparts, Asian counterparts, see, we're the only ones that will brag about getting our bag, getting successful and raising up, regardless, marry who you want, be who you want, live your life. We're the only ones popping that noise. They are not doing that. We can't get confused. You may see a little sprinkle of interracial relationships here and there, but for the most part, they're taking care of their community first, period, in the discussion. And while we're out here trying to secure the bag and thinking that that's what they're doing, even in their secure the bag mode, that nationalistic thread of them protecting their own community above everybody else's never goes away. But we fall into that trap and say stuff like it ain't about race no more, it's about money. Like we have no, and that's what Carter G. Woodson was trying to say. You done got so educated, you're unintelligent and can't see what's happening.
You can't see the big picture. Yeah.
We got to get back to family first. That's a family. We can't get the community first without family first.
100%, absolutely. And how does one do that when we're going against each other, like we talked about before? It's counterproductive. Thank you for that, for your response, Dr. Cloud. I have a specific question for you. Right. So you mentioned that you're a social worker and that you provide HIV STI outreach services in the community, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I
One of my jobs, but yes.
right. You wear many hats, but that's one of the things that you do.
Yes.
So my question to you is, let me preface it by saying I see a lot of ads and commercials about HIV medications, and they always include gay Black men as if they're the only group affected by HIV. So I'm curious, in your line of work, have you how does that impact you? How does that impact the people that you work with?
So I would say this. So a lot of these ads that you see, predominantly are around same gender loving males. Is because that HIV, not just HIV, but other STIs, gonorrhea, chlamydia, those are prevalent, STIs that we do see around the LGBTQ plus population, especially men sleep with men. But in the same regards, because I have to be very mindful about diversity, equity, and exclusion, we also have to understand that STIs, even HIV, does not have a name, does not have a preference on who it goes to, regardless of the sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we you see a lot of these commercials is because societies in the media way when the AIDS epidemic started, before I was even a thought in my parents' head, was that this was a gay disease. And it was coming from, first it was actually white gay men, and then it started becoming a bigger issue in the Black gay community. So they started saying, well, it has to come from black gay males. And so you will see that in the early, probably mid 80s, early 90s, you start looking at the AIDS epidemic, right? And you start seeing that it was a lot of more gay Black men who were exposed, or who were being labeled as positive. Now, what we're seeing in the media as we kind of move ahead with sexual health and sexual education is that we are starting to get into what we call U equals U, which means that it's undetectable status. So as long as you're taking your HIV medication, you're undetectable, you're able to transmit the virus. And you see a lot of it geared towards gay Black men in general, because that's what the media originally said that this disease came from, right? And so that's why you see that often. But now, what I love about my job and what I do is that we are starting to change the look. We are starting to change the perspective that HIV or STIs is not just a gay disease, or it's not just something that those who identify LGBTQ get. That it is people who are heterosexual Black men, heterosexual Black women, heterosexual Caucasian women, heterosexual Caucasian men, transgender. These STIs, HIV, it does not matter. And so the media is starting to change what that looks like. And we're not saying it's going to change in one day, but as medication advances, as the media kind of advances, we start seeing these changes gradually. We start seeing more ads with Black women, more ads with Latino individuals, more ads with Caucasian people. We're starting to change the stigmatization that HIV or STIs is something that comes from Black gay men. And I think, and I tell people this all the time. There is only one STD that women can blame a man for. It's only one, and that is trichomoniasis. And that the only reason why is because men are the carriers of trick. That is the only STD a woman can blame a man for, and she cannot even say it's not even technically it's an STD, but you can also catch trick from outside of having sex. For if a man doesn't properly clean himself from the gym, anything like that, trick formulates, and then it passes on to a female. And females are the only ones who would exhibit symptoms of trichomoniasis, but it comes from a man only. That is the only, I would tell people, that is the only STD you could blame a man for, regardless of race or race, ethnicity, anything like that. You can only blame us for trick. Other than that, how everything else is pretty much a soundboard. because STIs, yes, they may be sexually transmitted, but there are multiple ways outside of sex that you can catch an STI.
Right.
And when we start changing that negative image or connotation that it only comes from gay black men, we start also changing the perception of that, when we have gay black men who come to us, that they're going to die, that they're going to catch HIV, that they're going to be sick and stuff like that. Because for some, and I always tell people, the black community is the biggest enemy of black gay men. I've always believed that, because as black people, we would accept anything outside of a black gay male, and that's generational.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's generational. It has to do with religion, because a lot of us grew up in the church. That has to do with religion. And so when we start changing the negative in the media around it as well, when we start changing the narrative that it's like HIV work and stuff like that, does not mean that that person is sick, or that black gay male got it from being promiscuous. He could have got it from birth. He could have got it from accidental blood transfusion. Like, look at Magic Johnson, prime example, right? He got his. Well, he was cheating, but he was cheating with a woman. But I'm just still saying, he's not part of that stigmatization of, when he first caught it, people thought, oh, he must have got it from a man. No,
Right.
Magic was out here just cheating with a woman on his wife, and that's how he caught it. Right. Or if you look at it's not Will Chamberlain. There's a famous another athlete who got it from oh wait, that might is who got his from a blood transfusion gone wrong, because they
Wow.
didn't properly clean the blood. So we're starting to change. Yeah. And I don't think it's Will Chamberlain. I gotta remember what athlete that was. But when we start changing the narrative and the media's portrayal of HIV and STIs, and we start changing the narrative around that it's just a black gay male disease, we start we're more impactful. And that's really what my job I'm really focused on, is making sure that we are changing that narrative, and that we are changing the stigma that HIV is just a one person disease, when HIV has no name to who we get attached to.
Arthur Ashe.
Arthur Ashe.
I believe it was. I believe it was Arthur Ashe, the famous tennis player.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know
Yep.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It has no face, and STD does not care who you are,
Mm-mm.
as diseases often don't.
Mhm.
Okay, so I've taken enough of your time, but I do have one final question for you both.
Mm.
Unless there was some, or you know what? I'm not sure. I want to give you guys a chance to highlight anything that we didn't discuss, or anything that you want our audience to look up or read about, or your information. So I want to give you the opportunity to do that right now. Then I'll ask one final question to you both.
So I will say that if you ever want to see the media portrayal of a black man in a semi-positive light, and get to see a black man as he navigates and learns himself, there's a movie that came out in 2016 called Moonlight. It's one of my favorite films. It's called Moonlight. Trayvante Rhodes is in it. He was just in the movie with Kelly.
Yes,
He's in it.
yes.
Yeah, Mia Copa. So Trayvante Rhodes stars in this movie. It came out in 2016, and this movie is based, I want to say, in probably in the 80s or the 90s in Miami, Florida. And that movie we get to watch as the character, whose name is Sharon, as a young child, and as he grows up, how he navigates the three different stages. And the movie is broken down into three parts. So you go from when he's little to when he's a teenager, all the way up to when he's an adult, and how he's navigating not only his family life, because I ain't gonna say the whole movie, like his mom is an addict. So how he navigates that from a child, and then how his life kind of, the trajectory of his life from his upbringing up until adulthood. And that movie to me was one of the most powerful movies I ever watched, about a black man in a semi-positive light, because in that movie he has a positive male role model who, I'm gonna say, as a positive male role model, even though the guy sold drugs, he never sold drugs around him. But the way he took him in under his wing, like he was his own son, and the drug dealer's wife took him in as well, like it was his own son, while also working with the drug addicted mother as well. It shows like a multi-generational, how as black men how we kind of we have to navigate different things in life. And I think to me that movie is one of the like best movies. I think that's like been my favorite movie ever because I get to watch him as a child up until now. Because I hate Antoine Fisher. It's like the only movie I hate. But I like Moonlight is that one film I really think I would tell people to watch.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, okay, Pastor, your turn.
Um, so, like I said, if y'all could, if a person wants to see a representation of black men in a positive light who loves and fights for the community, old show called A Man Called Hawk by Avery Brooks. You find that is a good show. The dialogue is rich when talking about the black community. I also want to say, um, in terms of mental health and being a pastor, I had led many people to getting counseling. My ministry had won awards for helping out victims of sexual violence, preventing suicide on the campus of UNC Charlotte. But I myself had never been to mental health counseling. And upon my mother passing, my father passing a year later, and divorce 2 years after that, I found myself in an extremely unhealthy place of depression. I was pushing through 300 pounds, 47 in the waist, wearing a 4X, high blood pressure, hypertension, flirting with diabetes, prostate issues, kidney problems. And my doctor said, you got to do something. And I started going to mental health counseling, which led to a whole transformation of wellness for me.
Mhm.
I wrote a book called Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health. And because I'm talking about arriving at that intersection of faith and mental health and how we oftentimes have used religion to hide from our trauma.
Mm,
Mm.
But the book walks through the steps that I took to face my own mental health challenges to find what I call inspirational life keys. And so the book is called, again, Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health. And it's on Amazon. And so I do a lot of communicating. I teach a course called Masculinity, Faith, and Mental Health at UNC Charlotte. And so I'm big about having these conversations that need to take place because you can't disconnect mental health from behavioral health from one's physical health. They're all holistic, and it is naive at best to think that you could deal with them separately. And so I just wanted to communicate that. And that portrayal, since that's the main focus of this conversation, it is important for us to use the internet to find examples of healthy minded black men who are not perfect, but they overcome and deal with their stuff up front because you can't conquer what you don't confront. So that's was something I want to encourage the audience.
thank you so much. And also kudos to you for making that change in your life because you are still here and you look great. And you were able to share that inspiration. So that's no small feat. Congratulations to you. Um, so the last question, Dr. Cloud, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was gonna say you teach at UNC Charlotte. You can always invite me to guest speak if you need me to. I work right down the block.
All right,
I work right down the block.
Build that connection.
yeah.
All right, so this is the final question. So for the regular people like us that are not writing films, that are not putting out movies in shows, what can we do? What do you feel we can do on our end when it comes to media portrayal? Is it word of mouth, like, hey, this isn't how we are or how our black men are? Is it, I don't know, comment? Like, what do you think our options are as regular people who do not put out media?
So, from my perspective, I would say that whatever you see in the media, try to always, I guess I would say, whatever you see in the media, just always remember that it's not a true portrayal of black men, and always make black men feel like that they are seen, that they're heard, and that they're loved. Especially for those who don't do media. And I always make sure, I always let black men know that they are worthy of more than what society has put out on TV about them. and that there's always a safe space for them. I think when you give Black men a safe space to be their true authentic self, you get to see a side of a Black man that nobody else gets to see. And I'm very big about safe space. I tell people all the time, when I find my safe space and I'm able to be myself, I'm able to cry, or I'm able to just be vulnerable, then I truly know that I have found a home. And I think that's what the message I'm trying to say is, give Black men a space to call home outside of home.
Thank you. Pastor, it's your turn. You have the floor.
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. So as people who don't put out movies, we're not script writers, we're not producers. As regular people, what can we do to help with this negative portrayal of Black men?
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Dr. Cloud said. And I would also say, tell stories of Black men in a heroic light. Tell those stories. And nowadays, because of technology, it's very easy to make videos because of the way technology is. Tell stories, about the experiences that we've had, that a person has had, about things that Black men did that helped them, that supported them, that lifted them up, that guided them, that navigated them. And I know for me, and we got to remember that the oldest form of media in any way is the guru telling stories. That's some of the only ways that we know the legacy of our people is telling the stories. That's all film is anyway. And so it's important for us to tell the real life stories that we've had. I love when I go to reunion is we sit down and we tell various stories. We always tell family that beyond the formal part, we're all together. But as we break up in group, talk to somebody you don't usually communicate with and listen to some of the legendary stories. But now, because we got videos and people can put stuff on IG, we need to combat the negative energy by putting out positive energy. That self-determination needs to kick in. And it's hard to resist what's popular. But those of us who ever was about change doesn't mind going against the grain.
Thank you. This was a very enlightening interview. I appreciate you both. And, I know the viewers would definitely love everything that you mentioned and give them a lot to think about, as it did for me. So thank you both for joining. You guys are both, I'm sure you hear this enough, but you guys are both amazing Black men. Okay. You've done amazing things and you'll continue to do so. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.